What's up, everyone? We have the day of lock going on today. Coming a little bit hot here. But yeah, there are some interesting changes that have been going on in the GAC meta. Some tweaks to some of my favorite teams, as well as just stuff I'm seeing elsewhere. Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential interesting stuff. It kind of feels like we're in this waiting middle period. Kenobi coming soon, Commander Tano coming soon. But that actually doesn't mean that there can't still be interesting stuff to try right now. And if you're seeing these first few teams, then you can probably already tell that something weird is up. So, this is something that I'm actually kind of annoyed at myself for not seeing sooner. It feels fairly obvious because Rey was running Hermit Yoda for quite some time in the 3v3 meta before now. And then, for whatever reason, I actually still don't really remember, that started to phase out. Other teams started to get picked up. Rey, IG Queel, stuff like that. We got Relic 8. Rey building towards offense started to become a much stronger trend. If you are excited for Rey with Commander Tano, consider Hermit Yoda with an offense-built Rey to be your early access program. Master's Training gives her 25%, so not as big as Commander Tano will be giving her, but if you give your Rey a solid offense build, I have mine at around 13k offense. It's excessive. She has pretty much no health or no speed focus at all. Maybe some secondaries if I can find them, but I pretty much went all out on offense. You could reel it in from that a little bit probably, but the whole point here is to stack as much offense as possible. With Hermit Yoda, you need I believe it's do or do not Zeta. You will see whenever an ally with Master's Training is defeated, the cooldown gets reset. The whole ideal of this team is to shut out people who are relying on Eternal Emperor to defeat Rey. This cooldown, so let's say Hermit Yoda's AI is unreliable, right? Let's say if we're looking at this top team here, let's say he places Master's Training on Vandor first, right? In an Eternal Emperor battle, he won't have access to Hermit Yoda to link because he's in stealth. He can only link Vandor plus Rey. So worst case scenario, you are starting the fight off with a linked Vandor. I guess for other fights is, his damage reduction is quite nice. But also, if your Hermit Yoda gets it wrong, Eternal Emperor is just going to execute Vandor. Hermit Yoda will get the cooldown reset guaranteed, so even if it didn't come back up, even if you had him modded decently slow, he will just place Master's Training on Rey immediately. He will go back into stealth, and then you just have a supercharged Rey with Hermit Yoda in the pocket alongside her, giving her extra healing. This is something that has not fallen for me yet. I only started really trying this week. For Hermit Yoda, I actually think I like him. I don't want to say as fast as possible. I didn't actually even end up giving him that much this lock. He's only about 320-ish. But I do like the idea of him being speedy here. Trying to push some extra Master's Training cooldowns, making him a more proactive healer for if people are trying to pick her apart. Because Hermit Yoda always starts to match off in stealth, it can make it very, very tricky sometimes to, deal with a Rey plus Hermit Yoda two-person preload as opposed to something like a solo Rey, right? So yeah, feel pretty confident in this. You'll see a weird side version here. I haven't actually tested this, but this is more just a theorycraft idea. So the premise here, if you've seen my old Supreme Leader Kylo versus Rey video, this is actually a very similar idea, but for the purpose of hoping to post this on defense, if you think your opponent's going to Rey mirror. The goal for this team is, Hermit Yoda will be out of stealth sometimes, but most of the time will be in stealth, especially if we mod him fast, we'll narrow those windows where he's targetable. Mon Mothma can't be targeted, so if they're hoping to Rey mirror, their only real lifeblood target most of the time is going to be your Rey. So I don't necessarily think this will, fully beat a Rey mirror, but at the very least, this would cause a lot of discomfort and potentially even lead to a timeout, I think. Hermit Yoda, and even, Mon Mothma doesn't really have a whole lot of factional synergy or any synergy, but this 5 cooldown move can actually still provide a bit of healing, right? So even though she is just kind of there to be untargetable and to exist, she can still get a decent amount of work done. Again, very conceptual team right now. Just kind of keeping that back pocket if I ever think it would matter. But yeah, you would just get Hermit Yoda super fast. Ideally, add some bulk on if possible. Same for Mon Mothma. I use Mon Mothma for Grievous. I'm probably just going to leave that as is. Yeah, nothing really to think about there. On the flip side of things, if you are just running kind of a normal Rey, JML, I mean, people have been posting JML on defense for much longer. I know we used to have the JML gas team. That still exists, but I've kind of stopped using it for reasons we'll get to in a second. If you are posting Rey front wall, and you're not doing this, I think that's very, very specifically key here. Because the whole idea would be something like a Rey front wall, JML back wall. Rey front wall is like an Eternal Emperor bait, and then you have JML sitting back wall ready to go. The Rey comp is designed to block Eternal Emperor, so if they got through her, then they would just have Eternal Emperor against her JML. We know how that goes, right? So yeah, it's kind of an interesting idea to me. It has paid off in some situations where I usually don't go above 2 GLs posted on defense. A couple times I have gone to 3, and it's actually worked pretty well, and JML was the one that I went with. I still held Eternal Emperor. It went okay, and this wasn't JML gas. This was actually, most of the time it was like JML Ayla, usually with Cam, stuff like that, but I just wanted to give that a shout out. I don't think that's going to be a core staple for me. It's a nice mix-up, but again, I kind of like to hold some options for offense, kind of let the teams we're going to get to, again, here in a second, do more of the heavy lifting. And speaking of heavy lifting, of course, it can't really get much more heavy than... Still, I mean, this team hasn't really changed. I just wanted to continue to shout it out, just as a quick refresher. DR with fast Malik. Malik 1 speed faster than Darth Revan. Is stupidly good in 3v3. It has been since the start of 3v3, and that hasn't changed. So that's what it is. No real improvements I can think of. I still haven't really come up with a game plan for what I want to do with Bastila. I don't love the idea of just jamming a ton of speed on Bastila either. But until, right, like this team just hasn't really shown many weaknesses so far. So I don't know. I've kind of just been leaving her wherever. I haven't really been doing too much specific with her mods. It's been fine, right? It's a speed trap. She's just kind of there as a cheerleader / Revan buff who makes debuffs. So yeah, I mean, I think I got her around 290-ish. It's not amazing, not terrible. I don't think like slow, tanky, crit avoid bit and Spatula really matters for 3v3. I'm just kind of leaving that as is. Moving right along, we have a 2 pair here. I mean, obviously, Finn Double Bros is already on the way out in 3v3. I think people have finally started to realize and accept that it is Hana and Chewie food, which is why I've actually started to post it. I actually pretty much never posted Finn Bros in like the entire span of time where people really liked posting in 3v3 because I hated making that trade. I found them to actually be pretty good to use on offense. The reason why I've started now is because I have started to gain a big appreciation for General Skywalker on defense since somewhere around the middle of last 3v3 season. It has actually done quite well for me. It has single-handedly won me a match. With Finn Bros commonly being just like a Han Chewie bait. Especially, you know, you kind of need your Finn to be decently fast. Smart people would be able to just break it with something else like Troopers for fairly low cost, and still, if they suspected the gas, especially if it's in your match history, they would just be ready for that. It's still one of those things, right? I think we all know and understand that General Skywalker in 5v5 isn't, or in 3v3 isn't quite what he is in 5v5. You know, he loses a lot of that defense and protection, even tenacity, right? You kind of want to see 5-0 first with the 5-man squad bonuses. But if you go look at, you know, meta metric data, that team does not trade down, right? For the most part, General Skywalker trades even or trades higher. You reach this very sharp cutoff where people will start trying like CLS lead and stuff like that, and even that doesn't even have a good win rate. So Yeah, this is actually largely why I stopped using JML plus gas. I usually just like hold JML for if I fight like an SLK on offense or something, then I'll hold. It's been surprisingly good, and I wouldn't even say that my gas has that crazy of mods on. My Rex isn't super fast or anything. It's just 501st, right? But they're scrappy, and especially if you got like a Relegate gas now, it's one of the more popular relics. He can mess things up real quick, right? So yeah, definitely more of a damage focused build on him, not necessarily tank focused. It's fine. CLS, moving right along, is I thought he was going to be on the way out. You know, I made a video showing how Bad Batch, if they outspeed CLS with a Hunter, Tech, and Echo, can just disable this in team entirely. There are other comps that can disable this in team entirely. KRU Hux, which I don't think most people want to hold for offense right now. It's a very common defensive staple. But KRU Hux with the Terminator removal can also break this team's dependence on Terminator a lot of the time. I did think that CLS was going to be on the ropes. I thought it was on the way out. Even though I felt pretty decently confident in my CLS, like the Bruiser, Tenacity, Crit Avoidance, Protection stacking, modding style for CLS. Felt like a pretty solid way to put some pressure on JTR. I didn't think it fully blocked JTR, but I've gotten plenty of JTR holds. People who usually use JTR were scared off by it and didn't want to use it and blew something bigger. I doubled down this season because I thought like this team is kind of nearing its expiration date. It might be time to retire it. Let's just try to push it to its full potential. Happen to just have a crazy set of mods available, so I really kind of doubled down. The CLS is kind of bonkers now. This is like the idealized near perfect CLS. I don't expect, right, when this team got made, we are way so much above the cost of what this team was meant to be. But this has also been performing well. This actually stonewalled someone from getting through my first wall. They got through Darth Revan, they got through Jedi Knight Luke, which we'll get to in a second. This performed. It even held against I mean, I will say there was a modding disparity, but it held against Jedi Knight Luke with Hermit Yoda and Grandmaster Yoda. Yeah, the whole crux of this idea, and I don't even know if I mentioned this in a video yet last season, I will add on, is the idea of being extremely resilient. This team is happy to just take this battle to counterattacks. The extra speed also helps apply some pressure on opponents, and you have C-3PO with the exposed spam just dishing a ton of damage. One small change, but has paid off pretty nicely, I think, is the addition or change of 3PO and Chewie grabbing one Tenacity set and a Tenacity cross. Everything else is unchanged. Protection primary, Crit Avoidance arrow. Not even crazy on speed here. 241 is nothing, right? This small little bit extra Tenacity with the amount that he steals from CLS essentially gives 3PO and Chewie about 190% tenacity to 200%, depending on, you know, what you give him, right? He's very resilient. Luke, once he goes into offense stance, is more controllable, but it just gives the rest of the team a lot of presence and, you know, just kind of just being difficult to kill with the free crit avoidance that Chupio gives, crit avoid arrows on CLS and whenever he's in defense stance. It's quite solid. So yeah. Obviously, Bad Batch isn't going to be hitting the field just yet, so I think a lot of the speed just came from me being worried about that. A lot of people are drifting towards using Imp Troopers, which I consider to be 50-50 against CLS. It seems like, depending on what your CLS quality is, it seems like it takes Dark Trooper a third basic, which is a 50% chance if Piet calls, veers, or Dark. If you're worried about that, though, obviously, this crit avoidance is irrelevant against Dark Trooper. The character does not crit most of the time, so... Right, it's not a thing. You could maybe swap that to protection. We do have a decent amount of protection. He is fairly bulky, but, you know, depending on what you're in the mood for, I could see that being an angle to consider. So, you know, the team has lasted longer than I expected. It's still doing quite well. I'm debating trying to clock C-3PO to 19 or 21 speed under CLS. I'm debating putting CLS fastest in the turn order. I think for people using JTR, Depending on their JTR speed, I think CLS being faster could make C3PO more impactful. It's hard to say. A lot of this stuff is still up in the air. I'm still experimenting. Like, I'm not used to taking this team to such a weird high level. But it's been cool. It's been interesting. It's definitely giving this team some longevity. Speaking of longevity, though, this team has... I think this team is the closest to expiring because Gideon is becoming so popular now, and this team is almost entirely a pure speed trap, and Gideon wins this race extremely easily. Yeah, still the same as before, still like a solid Vader trap, everything like that. GK doing a phenomenal job here. This is ultimately just a speed race of Shaak Ti against Gideon. And yeah, I think Gideon has 11 base speed advantage, which is crippling, right? This is some of the fastest mods I could give Shaak Ti. She's only 364. Gideon does not struggle to get to 365, let's say. For not even, cheaper mods than what I threw on. If you want to continue to use this team, and you're starting to see Gideon speeds get up there, there's two main things. Either I think you choose a speed that you try to... Like, you think about lock psychology, right? You think a lot of people probably like to get their Gideon to like 360, 361, 362. Maybe stop there. That's kind of how I landed on 364 or 363. Just as a way to try to exploit how I expect people will try to budget their mods. Because at some point, Gideon doesn't need to be insanely fast. And this seemed like an okay stopping point for me. Obviously, this depends on what mods you have available, all of this and that, but you need to be thinking about this. I used to just run this with a 350 Shaak Ti. It was perfectly fine. It all worked out. Maybe, 352 for Darth Revan's sake. It wasn't this expensive. Gideon, I think, has started to drive the price of this team up for me. Also, this depends on your matchmaking bracket, if you're even doing Gideon at all, or people with enough mods to do that. I just want to spread awareness that this is a concern. Now, if you still really like this team, I think you have a couple of options. You could either do something like run an Imp Trooper bait on the front wall to try to draw Gideon out. It would have to be a team where Piet alone wouldn't be fast enough. Or, one thing that I started to do, off and on, I've gone back and forth, is you could also consider giving Jedi Knight Luke a crit avoidance arrow if you have it. This is the one that I was running on him last season. It's 5 speed. Right? It's, I guess you could say the protection is nice for Luke and it's got some alright offense, but that would at least be a way where if you suspect that Vader is going to get a chance to attack, then the crit avoidance might buy your JKL some time. But again, yeah, it's even that, I'm not even sure if it's enough. It's tough to say. Alright, this is why I'm a little bit skeptical on how long this team is going to continue to last. It is a decently costly team, and yeah, I think it would be nice to be able to redistribute stuff if the time comes. For now, I think it's still serving its purpose well. It still mostly feels like a draw GL or bust type team, kind of like DR. It's still not expired yet. It's on the fence. So worth keeping in mind. And last but not least, this is kind of an honorable shout out. I haven't really tried this too much. But I was looking at team options in the GAC meta. And Treya's data, obviously there weren't too many matches. It's not that common of a team to post on defense. And, if they happen to have it, they could always just bust out something like Magma, probably. Treya's matchup table is kind of like what I said with General Skywalker. The team doesn't really seem to trade down that often. They either trade sideways or they trade upwards. And when I'm looking for a defense sometimes, I would consider this to be a fairly expensive defensive choice because, usually you run Triumvirate, but you can split off Nihilus into a different team and run like Treya Scion +1, fighting Padme, stuff like that. We'll get to another way I use Treya in a second. And I kind of like having Triumvirate on offense, even though their offense banners aren't that great. But I can't really argue with the results I'm seeing so far. Not to say that SOH IGG data is extremely reliable. You don't get the full story of gear, speed, mods in general. For if a someone won a matchup or lost a matchup. I mean, Vader versus DR, the counter I've been using consistently on stream ever since I first made it, has like a 50% win rate, right? So even that alone. But at least in terms of looking for successes, there aren't a whole lot of great cheap teams to take down Trey at the moment, it seems. So if you have great high relic Triumvirate, which I guess actually, by the way, I should mention, another reason why this is potentially on the chopping block is because good Triumvirate can handle this fight fairly comfortably. And that is actually a pretty horrific trade. That, of course, assumes that they went out of their way to do the relic work on the Triumvirate, but, you know, there isn't too much I think you can do for your team to mod against it. Maybe feed JKL some protection. It's not gonna matter, I don't think, right? JKL gets isolate pretty easily. It all just kind of falls apart from there. So yeah, I mean, it's all up in the air still. I think I've gotten some holes against Triumvirate with this JKL team, but I think it was potentially misplayed as well. But I think it's worth keeping in mind. But yeah, again, haven't really tested Triumvirate myself on defense. I ran it once. I don't think they even got to the back wall, so I couldn't see how they did because they didn't do anything. But they are out there. It does exist. On the offense side of things, it's still not really an area where I have too many thoughts yet. I'm still kind of learning things more than anything. Couple of interesting findings I've had so far. I mean, for Mon Mothma versus Grievous, Gambit has been running K2 for a while. It does feel to me like Kara might be a more interesting choice there. I noticed from watching some of their fights that because K2, or the team just doesn't really have a whole lot of Terminator removal, it seems like Grievous, you know, depending on his speed, depending on his modding, can get AoEs off more often. So once you get into the final stand, sometimes you get 53, but if it's a decently fast Grievous, he'll lap back to his AoE again, potentially rob you of banners, take you down to a 51. Kara's Terminator removal feels pretty good to me here. She gets it every other turn. She can just keep shoving Grievous's Terminator back, and it's been a pretty, like, I can't even say pretty. I've never gotten below 53 banners with it, so very small thing, and like, you know, maybe you could be using Kara elsewhere and you wouldn't be using K2 elsewhere. But I just want to shout that out. That does feel like a fractional improvement, but it does feel worth mentioning that if you have the option, that might be more consistent banners for you. On the weird side of things, but actually I felt pretty good about this. General Skywalker on defense has been popping up more, kind of as I was saying. Traya, lead Han and Chewie is expensive, but I actually found it to be quite nice as a way to break General Skywalker. The whole concept behind this was that General Skywalker and 5s counterattack, and the Traya lead percent health damage, 40% health was basically 2 exposes. And if you imagine, you know, Han shoots General Skywalker twice, that is 80% health damage. It's almost like a bootleg C-3PO for the team. It gives you some extra pushing power that I think some other fights potentially miss. I will say I've seen a couple of streamers, I think good old Maurice, use Beskar Mando, and I would probably consider Beskar to be cheaper than Traya here. But if you're in a pinch, if you post Beskar on defense as filler and keep Triumvirate or anything like that, I just wanted to give this a shout out. This felt pretty good to me. Now, I will say, you have to play this a little bit strangely. You have to avoid stopping your opponents from counterattacking, which is not how you usually think about these fights, right? So, stuns, isolate, Traya basic with the daze, Chewie stun. If you're doing something like hitting 5s or General Skywalker, people that will counterattack, you want to avoid that. So, Han basic, Traya first special doesn't prevent counterattacking, stuff like that. Easiest way to make quick progress. But yeah, I mean, got through a gas fight with everyone left standing. I think it was somewhere around like 51 or 50 banners. It felt pretty okay. Beskar Mando seems like it might be cleaner. It kind of leaves IG-11 and Queel in a weird spot, especially if you're going this route with Rey. But, you know, I mean, this has kind of been the fun of 3v3 lately, is figuring out where you're sliding around all these teams. Yeah. Feel pretty good about this stuff overall. Rey especially, I cannot wait. this amount of offense already felt quite promising, and obviously I was excited for Commander Tano, but she is roughly, I think, 16.7k offense now. You could have, I think, like the best possible Eternal Emperor in the game, health stack wise, should probably still die to second Rey ult here, which I'm very excited about because, yeah, I mean, it puts your opponent in a really weird spot. It almost essentially just becomes Rey mirror or bust, which is potentially where things could be headed with Commander Tano. We will see. But yeah, all right, that'll be it for me. Good luck out there with Locke. This is gonna be an interesting couple of weeks here. We're heading towards Master Kenobi potentially hitting the tables in week 4. Commander Tano will be back by next 3v3 season, and we gotta talk about that at some point. But yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm excited for Vandor for this team. I did shout it out. Speedless, health stack. Don't add extra protection. Yeah, that's the extra benefit here, is Eternal Emperor just doesn't really get much protection from Vandor. But yeah, speedless. You don't really care about the character going, but also the longer he doesn't go, the more he'll just keep damage immunity. It all just kind of works out well together. So keep that in mind. Give it a shot. Yeah. Good luck out there. Happy hunting.